Yeah, good to go. Hello everyone, how are we today? For those of you visiting my channel for the first time, my name is Wallace. The focus of my channel is on philosophy. I have been stuck with a couple of months of stage fright since the first episode I made, and I thought it was about time I got down to it and did a proper video again. I'll apologise in advance if this sounds scripted, because it is. I cannot do this off the cuff. So, the subject we'll be discussing today is, what is morality? We're going to be trying to determine what morality is in practical terms and how it works or can be best applied. Now, just before we get right into it, I'd like to say that my opinions on philosophy are just that. They are opinions. You can feel free to agree or disagree, and I'm more than willing to listen to a variety of perspectives, be them secular or religious in nature, is fine by me, as long as we try to stay on topic. So, without further ado, we'll get into the video. Enjoy. What is morality? To identify any given subject matter, you need to figure out in what way does it exist. Is it natural or artificial? Now, I can't find anything physical in nature that represents morality. There isn't a stone or a carved tree that says this is morality. It seems to be entirely a biological construct. If I had to pin it down, I think its origins stem from a combination of our survival instinct along with our sense of pleasure or pain. If you try to find the roots of any moral position, you'll likely find it has some relation to do with what is beneficial or harmful to one's life or to the life of another. In some cases, yes, a moral position is based purely on disgust or discomfort with an idea, but I think it's mostly based on survival. For example, it's considered morally good to save someone's life. This is in keeping with our survival instinct, as nobody wants themselves or a loved one to die. And it's morally bad to murder someone because this is antithetical to our survival instinct. And permitting this would be permitting someone to kill another means that there's nothing stopping them from killing you. So morality is not a singular thing in existence. It's a kind of behavioural commitment a living thing makes in mutual agreement with other living things. It seems in creating morality, we are trying to create a social contract that best meets the needs of a person's life without taking from another's life. It's not just a state of mind, but it's mostly a commitment. This is a key thing to remember, as I think in order for any moral system to function, it requires consistency or integrity in its place. So obviously this all sounds like a secular approach to morality, and it is. However, I don't disregard religion as a means of establishing morality. I'm just of the position that anything can be understood from a logical perspective. And it's not limited to the word of God or the word of science. It's just not good enough to do as you're told. By God, by science, or by a government, you have to understand why things work the way they do. I mean, where would our morality come from if we, through some unfortunate event, civilization was destroyed? We lost every book, we lost our history, we lost our technology and our places of worship. Where would our morality come from? Now, you might be able to say God is always with us, but it is still up to us to figure out how this morality is supposed to work. So, what is morality? I would say it is a social contract of mutual benefit that originates from our most basic needs, implemented as a standard of behaviour or attitude towards others. So, let's move on to the next part, how it works or is best applied. So I have a few principles that I remind myself of regularly in order to practice a logical approach to morality. These principles are primarily based on whether or not harm is being caused. The reason why I have this as my limiting factor is, from what I can tell, that is the primary basis for moral behaviour, which is avoiding, preventing, or resolving harm being caused. For example, a person is polite even when they are angry. This is a moral act, as it is taking responsibility to avoid causing harm. Or someone helps a person pick up something they dropped, as they might struggle on their own. The reason why we willingly participate in this social contract, even at our own expense, is because we have empathy, or because we understand what it means to invest in an idea. When someone does something selfless, it's not entirely without self-interest. Often selfless acts are done to feel good about oneself, or to construct a positive image of oneself, or it's an investment in the hope that a kindness is offered in return. This isn't a bad thing, and it doesn't diminish the significance of a kindness given. I'm just acknowledging our motivations for doing things. It's all in our own interests. The question is, does the other person care to share in the spirit of this mutual contract? Those who don't are often what we refer to as selfish people. They are self-interested individuals like the rest of us, except they take for themselves without regard for and or at the expense of someone else. Or they force others to do things the way they like it, without regard for how it affects the person they are imposing on. It's important to understand self-interest is critical to human nature. We can't escape it, and both selfish and selfless people are motivated by self-interest. This is also part of how our moral social contract works. For example, let's imagine there is a cake, and there are 6 people who want that cake. Now, a selfish person directs their self-interest by taking a larger piece of cake, or even the whole thing, and lets other people lose out. Or maybe, sometimes, shames or guilt trips another person into surrendering their piece of cake. This form of self-interest is fairly uncooperative, with short-term gain and high-risk long-term consequences, as the other 5 people likely won't appreciate being treated that way. This behaviour is easily classed as immoral because it is doing harm to others. Remember, that's our key point of contention there, that morality is based on whether or not harm is being caused. Now, a selfless person directs their self-interest by investing in the goodness of others, taking a smaller piece or surrendering their piece to another person. This form of self-interest is somewhat submissive, with short-term pain and high-risk long-term benefits. The other 5 people might appreciate the selfless person for their offer and give a kindness in return, but it's not guaranteed. This behaviour is easily classed as moral, as it is beneficial to others. Now, for the savvy self-interested person. The savvy self-interested person directs their self-interest by taking only an equal portion, 1/6 of the whole cake, allowing others to have a fair share. No one loses out, and no one has to have an undeserving reputation for being generous or selfish. This is actually both high risk, short-term and long-term gain, as this is investing in a social contract that others on both sides might not care for. There is a risk the selfish person will take for themselves, and there is a risk this selfless person will use the act to paint a better picture of themselves than everyone else. However, this behaviour is still moral in its nature, as it is beneficial to others. Now you can see how this moral social contract works. Surely we've all met selfish people, selfless people, and those in between who don't show too much kindness to others, but don't behave negatively towards anyone either. We are all operating within our own self-interest. But most of us, I think, want fairness and reciprocity. So most people, from what I've seen, operate in a scheme of politeness, non-interference, and small gestures of assistance and cooperation. This moral fabric is one of the critical things operating in the background that keeps our civilization not just running smoothly, but standing tall in the first place. So, for this reason, it's very important to understand two basic principles when establishing or making a commitment to any moral position. Principle 1, being moral is a responsibility. It's not something that just is. Morality does not exist in nature. It is something we humans have created so that we have a common understanding and a social contract that is mutually beneficial in some way or another. If not immediately, but maybe sometime in the future. Principle number 2, for morality to be maintained, one needs to understand integrity is key to its survival. It's one thing to take responsibility, it's another to remain consistent in that responsibility. For example, if you take the moral position that someone who has a different lifestyle to your own should be left to their devices and is not to be discriminated against, you might vocally declare this virtue by saying, it's their life, it's their business, and it has nothing to do with me. That's fine. That's a perfectly acceptable moral position. But what happens when someone's lifestyle choices is something that upsets you personally? Sure, it was easy to tolerate people when you didn't perceive their life affecting you in any way. Now it does. Would you maintain your virtue of accepting another's way of living? What if you're just having a bad day? You're angry and don't have much patience for anyone or anything at the time. Will you hold true to your virtues? That's where integrity comes in, and avoiding hypocrisy is the most difficult thing to do when committing to a moral position, as it requires you not only know why you took the position in the first place, but you need to remind yourself of it often, even when you don't like it. You could also say having a reserve of patience is important as well. So, I will share a couple of moral principles I hold and remind myself of as to maintain a demeanour of civility and encourage others to maintain civility. This is for the sake of maintaining the pride of the civilizations we've built. So, principle number 1. Respect is something to be given. This is because respect is not a currency, and there is no means of enforcing payment. But just like currency, it is something we would all like to have. It's true, no one is obligated to pay you respect, but this can even be when you have done more than enough to earn it. Which I'm sure we can agree is not very nice. However, if one is not willing to treat others with respect in the first place, how can you expect to receive any at all? For this reason, basic respect is something we should be willing to give others, regardless of our wealth, stature, or lack thereof. Yes, it is possible to lose respect for bad deeds done and gain respect for good deeds. But a basic level of respect should be given to others if you want others to be respectful towards you. Principle number 2. Regardless of what you think of someone, if they're not hurting anybody, they're not doing anything wrong. This statement is about tolerance, but it's also about avoiding unnecessary conflict. You might not like someone or how they behave or what they believe, but are they currently hurting anybody? Or is it just that you don't like it? Now, principle 3 is, generally, I find the defining differences between good and bad people are as follows. Good people try to avoid causing harm and only cause harm accidentally or in defense of themselves or another. The things they do for their own benefit is either done in a manner that avoids putting the expense on others or is of mutual agreement. Now, bad people intentionally or callously cause harm to others for their own benefit or satisfaction. The things they do for their own benefit usually comes at the other's expense, or the mutual agreement was coercive in its nature. Now, when I've referred to the concept of harm, I have meant to say what I think most people could commonly understand as something direct. It's something done intentionally or callously that has caused tangible pain or damage to the other person, which includes their body, their identity, or their property. So, with all that out of the way, I would like to present a little project I've worked on for a couple of years. It's a flowchart for logical, objective, moral decision making. Yes, I have really made a flowchart for morality. That's how much I've been able to condense this down. It didn't actually take me years to make the flowchart itself. It just took me that time to understand the moral concepts I've put forward today and to finally condense it into a simple moral decision-making framework. So there it is. Take a moment to look it over. Feel free to pause the video even if you like. Now, follow me from top to the bottom. We have the event and subject that's currently happening or being debated. Now, the reason why I've included a subject that's being debated is because not all moral situations are actions. Some moral situations are an argument taking place over what is the correct or right thing to do. Excuse me. The next step is to separate thought from feelings. You have to separate your personal feelings from the matter because feelings are not objective, and therefore it increases the likelihood of you making a bad decision. The point of being moral is to not cause harm, and the last thing you want to do is make things worse. Then you have to assess if harm is actually being caused, about to be caused, or if the information or methods being used are incorrect, which in themselves can cause harm. The next two sections, the no and yes and the making decision to act, are combined as the moment of decision. If you can say that there is no harm being caused, there's no harm about to be caused, or the information and methods being used are correct, you can easily come to the conclusion to leave the matter alone and get on with your day. If, on the other hand, you can see harm is being caused, is about to be caused, or the information is incorrect, you can choose to speak up, defend yourself, or call for help. However, in some cases, whether or not harm is occurring can be in question, or if the harm is minor and potentially not an issue, or you are afraid of making things worse. The chart has, over here on the right, an indecision breaker. This allows you to weigh, as to the best of your knowledge, weigh against your knowledge how important this situation really is. And if you find that this does matter, you can circle back to yes, and you can resolve it by saying speak up, defend yourself, call the authorities. Or if you find that the situation doesn't really matter all that much, you can resolve by going back to no and leaving things be and getting on with your day. So, before we finish this episode, it's important to remember everything I've talked about is in general scenarios. I think it can be helpful for other things, but it's not designed for complex social or political issues, nor is it well equipped for long-term issues, as there are some long-term consequences for things that are harmful, but might not be apparent in the initial scenario. So there's lots of things to cover in the subject of morality, and what I've presented so far is just one part of the whole subject. I intend to make an entire channel dedicated to philosophy, and I'm sure we'll cover the other aspects of morality in due time. And there's other subjects related to it. So, we'll just do a quick summary of what we've covered today. Morality is a social contract of mutual benefit that originates from our most basic needs, implemented as a standard of behavior towards others. It is primarily based on avoiding, preventing, or resolving harm and encouraging beneficial cooperation between each other's self-interests. The key things required for a moral position to function are knowing why you took the moral position in the first place, Being moral is a responsibility. It's not something that just is. Making a declaration is not enough. It's how you practice it. And integrity or consistency is required for morality to be maintained and for hypocrisy to be avoided. One must be willing to remind themselves of their moral positions, even when they don't like it. I'd also like to say that this video and everything that we've talked about today is for your consideration only. It's not to be used to judge anyone. If there is any judging going on, it's to be judging yourself. So I'll end the video for today. Please feel free to discuss in the comments your perspectives on this subject. I welcome thoughts from both secular and of faith, as I said before. I hope you've enjoyed this video and that you've enjoyed the rest of your day. See you in the next episode.